Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Well, thank you, Sean. The newly betrothed Sean Sauer, ladies and gentlemen. I just have to embarrass him. A quick update on Sean back from Ireland. Nervous flyer. So I told him flying's easy. It's a sudden acceleration in that last foot. That's what kills you. So once again, we have another great interview lined up. And I think if any of you guys have been reading our website over the last few years, you know my love of games by John Tiller. I've been playing those games since I would say in the 90s when they first came out. And I've written articles on the amazing Panzer campaigns and Panzer Battle series. My collection is huge. Last week, I got a copy of the upcoming Orel game that's coming out, which kind of finishes the whole Kursk story. And I go, hey guys, love to interview one of you people. And they said, how about David Freer? I go, you mean a guy that worked on most of your games? So welcome to the show, Dave. How you doing today?
I'm wonderful. I'm very, very happy to be here and sharing the chair with you.
Yeah. So like I said, most people know I'm a fan. When he like offered you up, I'm like, he kind of knows I, play all the games, know who you are. But let me talk about your background. How'd you get into all this?
Oh, it goes back a long, long, long time. I'm a classic teen or something of the 80s when, board games were coming out thick and fast, and more importantly, PC games at that time was actually Apple and other games were coming out. And I worked with an Australian group, and if people can't tell, I'm an Australian from the accent.
Oh, I was going to tell people you're from the South.
Yeah, very, very clear. Very south of Australia, I think. But yeah, I worked with a company called SSG, which was based here in Australia with a gentleman named Ian Trout and Roger Keating. And they brought out games called Carriers at War.
I love
Warlords. Yes, Warlords, Europe Ablaze, the range of other titles. They're still around. And I worked with them in the 80s on a part-time basis. So that's how I started in gaming many, 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 many moons ago. So we're getting towards the 40-year mark. But in real life, where you earn money, I've been in tech for the bulk of my career. And the most recent job before getting fully involved with WDS or Wargame Design Studio, I was in cybersecurity for many, many, many years, which, as people can imagine, has been a very busy industry to be in. So that's where I've spent the vast majority of my time in the cyberspace and working across the globe, actually. So though I'm now based in Australia, I spent a lot of the last 14 years up in Singapore and working out all around the world.
Well, if you make it to the United States, we're going out.
Yes, well, I've been there many a time, predominantly on the coasts, east and west, occasionally in the middle. I've been to Texas quite a few times, but a lot less now that I'm not working for a US corporation. So not quite as often over there, but I will definitely get there. I can promise sometime in the future.
All right. And, I'll take an invite really kind of anywhere. Matter of fact, just south of you is the only continent I've never been to.
Antarctica.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's a story. I was almost able to go. Most people out here know it. I'll tell you offline. You mentioned board games.
Yes.
80s. I'm guessing we're around the same age. What was your first game? We usually ask this question at the end. What was your first game that made you know you were going to be a war gamer?
Yeah, well, board games, I'm going to go back another 5 years. It was the mid-70s. At the same time as I was getting my first album, which I'm scared to admit was ABBA at the time, so that really isn't good. But I want to think and say it was Mech War 77 with SBI.
Oh yeah.
It was the first one I bought, and that was a proper game. But I'd been playing things like Avalon Hill, Third Reich, and a range of others at that particular time. And I think the board game that stuck out for me that I really enjoyed was on the cusp of the 80s, and that was by Mark Herman. It was Victory Games Pacific War, and I got a real love for the Pacific at that particular time. I even use, and no one will ever work this out, but my password is tied up, my various passwords are tied up to Japanese carriers. So that'll tell you what.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Oh, I can't tell you that. You might work out my password.
I just, you're a cybersecurity expert. I knew I wasn't going to get you.
Yeah,
Mark Herman's
exactly.
Mark Herman's an interesting guy. Um, he makes a lot of games that will cause you to lose friends, but
Hmm.
he makes great games. And somebody came to my house not too long ago, and anybody that is on Board Game Geek can see about the 300 games I own. They go, "You seem to like a lot of these specific games," and I go, at a time they were just so different, and now to me it's really not all that different. So, and you talk about Carriers at War. I love the hell out of that game. I still have it on my computer.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a fantastic game. It's a big reason I'm really looking forward to what the boys at Dry Dock Games are doing. I don't know if you followed any of that.
you talking about Task Force Admiral?
Yes, yes,
Well, they've been
yes.
teasing that thing out for how long now?
While I have managed to make contact with Elaine, who is the lead behind that, they're doing some fantastic stuff. And
Anytime you want to do an invite, I would love to sit down with you again and those guys to talk about that game because it really looks fantastic.
yeah, no, that's going to be just for what a small team's achieved. It's amazing, and yeah, it's the little things that people don't realize what's involved. But you know, changing a formation, turning to starboard or port and keeping a formation, an anti-aircraft formation, or whatever in place, they've got the code to do it. And trust me, that's not easy. We've got something similar in naval campaigns. Our ships aren't as adept as what they're doing in their title at the moment. So no, very impressed with what they're doing. There's some amazing stuff coming.
It is. It is. I mean, eventually we'll have to talk about your game. So, and that's what most people I think are tuning in for. So, when it comes to some of the designers for WDS now, and in the past, JTS, and way back when he was on HBN, and
Yep.
then Talentsoft, you've kind of done a lot of games. If you could mention a few, because we could
Yeah,
be here
so
for a while.
we could be, but you know what? I'm probably led quite a few games. There are only 5 that are directly attributable to me, sort of end to end, and that is 2 Panzer Campaigns games, which are Kharkov 43, which is the very first one I did for Tiller, and was actually the launch title for when he became John Tiller Software after HPS. And the second one, which I was actually particularly proud of, was one called Moscow 42, because that covered not just the counterattacks around Moscow in 1942, but also a hypothetical, which was planned to take Moscow in the summer of 42 instead of going to the south of Russia in Fall Blau. So that was my second title. And then the 3 that I probably put my hallmark on is Panzer Battles. So I've
I
done
knew
all
that.
3 Panzer Battles titles. And
You know,
uh,
it's my favorite of the series.
yes, which one?
All three of them.
Uh,
Um, I the Normandy game to me was the first that came out, and it Panzer campaigns for those that don't know, and you should. is kind of an operational look at World War II battles for the most part, and it excels in that. It does so many neat things under the hood, which I'm gonna ask you about. But when you get to Panzer battles, it really kind of breaks down that battalion commander fight and larger, and it is so well done. Some of those scenarios are amazing in there. I like all things not American to play in games. I,
Mm.
yeah, call me British, I guess, right? Can't call me a pommy, but I really like the game. And then the curse game. No, the curse first.
Yeah, Kursk was first.
Curse was first. So it was where I fell in love with it. The Normandy. It is, and I believe there's another one coming out. Not or is the Moscow one out yet?
No, you can grill me on that in a minute. Um,
Oh, I
what
plan
you,
on it.
what you, I know. What you hit the nail on the head with is the battalion level in Panzer battles. The feel is so different between Panzer campaigns and Panzer battles, yet it's pretty much the same engine. That's what's fascinating. The whole emphasis changes on what people are doing and the forces they control and a range of other things. It really makes quite a difference in how that all hangs together. And what do I mean by that? I wrote an article on the back of the North Africa title, which honestly is a fascinating um, title in itself. The way you have to manage your forces, the way each unit has a different responsibility. You might have an engineer platoon, you might have a mortar platoon, you might have an anti-tank platoon. You have to use them totally differently. In Panzer campaigns, a lot of that fidelity is lost, and it's a very different approach. You just can't throw platoons everywhere because they fall apart. You've got to work in company-sized units. You've got to work in battalion units to make it really work well. And the interesting thing you mentioned Panzer Battles Moscow. We've actually taken some of the scenarios that we've done in Panzer campaigns, Moscow 42, and converted them to Panzer Battles scenarios. They play similarly but different. And crossing the ice of the Volga near Kalinin with your companies is pretty hard, and you don't get the level of detail in Panzer campaigns that you see in Panzer Battles. Very different feel.
You
But
know,
very pleased with that series.
you hit the nail on the head. You have to know what your engineers do. You have to know when to mount your mech forces, and you really close in for close assault. Where in Panzer battles, you're looking at one unit is a battalion or part of a battalion, and the other thing I like about your system is you can kind of split them apart, build them back up.
Yeah, yeah,
Unless you need to take a strong point, you're not assaulting all that much because it's unforgiving. But in the other
and
game, you really have to use your fires and your capabilities.
yeah, it's quite a different emphasis. Um, and you hit nail on the head. It's a tactical, not low tactical, which is what our squad battles engine is, but it's tactical enough that it's take that hill and exploit. Whereas Panzer campaigns is cross the river, take the town, cross that hill and keep going. It's just very different emphases, and that's what I love about gaming. You can put yourself at a different command level with a different series of problems, yet the same resources, and have to come up with different decisions. And that's one of the things that got me into gaming in the first place was, can I do better than what the historical guys did um, with the same resources that they had? Can I do better or worse? And
I got
that was the starting point for me.
I got into it with a Wargamer Online um, because I said, you know what makes any historical game ahistorical? The moment I move a unit, and
Mm.
this person was livid. I go, here's the thing: I'm not back when this battle was being fought. I'm sitting here, actually exactly where I'm sitting now when I play a computer game or at a table playing a board game. As soon as I start moving stuff around, I have really two decisions. Either I do confirmation bias, I do the same thing they did and hope I roll better, but then why play the game? Or I try my own solution here. And I think that is like the beautiful thing that games do, why they're fun, and believe it or not, in some cases you can even learn something,
Yeah.
um, which is kind of scary.
Look, it'll be a. You are right. It'll be a historical the moment you do a movement, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
As being involved in the design side, one thing that was really interesting in the approach, the developers that came before me said, we want to aggregate values. We want to average items out. This tank battalion's got two different types of tanks. We'll do a meld of value for them. One of the things I flipped on its head a little bit was I said, hang on, you're taking away the nuance that some of the times was the advantages and disadvantages sides had. So if we try and emulate as well as we can the values, the forces, whatever that were there, more often than not, a historical outcome happens. If you've got
Hmm.
tired men or less men, guess what? They're not going to fight as well. If you try and average out across all the men you've got, then you may be watering down one of the disadvantages a side had. Um, and from an equipment perspective, if they've got more Panzer threes and Panzer fours, then they're going to be disadvantaged. But if you average it, then you don't have that differential when I'm using my units. I've got to be more careful with my Panzer threes versus my Panzer fours. So one of the things I've tried to do with a lot of the work I do is create it as historically in terms of the setups, the forces, where they are, the strengths they are, the equipment they had. Then the player gets to try what they want to try
Yep.
from that point. But with the advantages and disadvantages the guy physically had. And you use Curse as a great example. There's a truckload of Panthers, but tell you what, the breakdown value for those are really high. And you're going to have all the problems the Germans had using them. Very
Hmm.
effective if you can get a chance to shoot them, but very ineffective if they're sitting in a field broken down and get hit by artillery. So you've just got to understand the nuances of the pros and cons both sides had, and then say, how do I emulate that in a title? And
Hmm.
what's the best way to approach it?
And where I don't, I'm once again big math and statistics nerds. We're gonna get into that too, but it is what I really like about that series. One of the first ones well, it's not one of the first ones I got, but the one I always keep playing is Market Garden. Or can
Yep.
I get to the bridge fast enough? And one of the cool things about the series, your AI slider advantage and how you can kind of pick and choose some of the rules that are played within the game. And I find that interesting because if I'm beat the AI in your game is are really good. If I find that I'm beating them too much, I'll stop the game, start again, and make it a little harder because I am such a fan of the game engine and just
Mm,
watching kind of how that engine works and makes my job easier. Um, I don't like RTS games because of the helmet fire.
yeah.
In your games, you don't have that. You really can put down your decisions and plan things ahead. And some games, just because of the historical aspect, you have to. Um, I did a review of Shelf 44,
Yep.
and for a computer game that emulates siege warfare in some respects with horrible terrain and you don't have a lot of forces, especially playing against the AI, trying to crack these German defenses, it is difficult, but not in a bad way, in a challenge. As you guys design that game, you guys are gamers yourselves. Is that the kind of experience you're hoping us, the fans,
It-
feel?
we are, and you know what? That's a really good title to talk about. We debated that title. It's a reason it's one of the later ones in the series. the reason we debated it was exactly what you said. It was a slog. It was one of those really hard, in the mud, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, overwhelmed the stronghold. But the reason we did it was fascinating from what actually physically happened. They flooded an island to get the defenders off. They had to push them out. Um, but both sides were absolutely exhausted. We got some lovely hate mail, would you believe, from a Canadian gentleman who complained that we downgraded the Canadians so badly, and how dare we? Because Canadians in most games we play are normal to good, really good morale, but we'd marked them down quite significantly, and they were up against the German foot and mouth battalions, to be honest with you, because this was just after the breakout from Falaise and the range of other things. Why have we done that? Because that's what the forces there were. The Allies had taken so many losses leading up to that particular campaign that a lot of green recruits were being put in, or rear area troops were being put in, pushed through that assault. Now, it's interesting because we debated whether to do it because it was going to be a hard campaign for players to get engaged in. But the designer who did it, Mike Prusha, spent so long doing the research. He said, you know what, there's so many angles on this. He said, do you realize how much the Belgian and Dutch resistance were involved? And how do we emulate that? And so we added a whole lot of things like irregular troops, which had actually been pulled out of our First World War campaign series, as well as partisans and a range of other things, because they had a really material impact. And all of a sudden we had a game of a very different situation to what we're used to setting up, and give it a try. Now, the fact that you felt that it was a slog through the mud, but you had to assault the position, but you felt like you're making progress, yeah, that's what we want you to feel. It's not all fresh air and sunshine when it comes to fights and battles. I'm reading something on Ukraine today where they're just saying that it is stalemating because where technology is right. The sensors and the ability to call artillery down is
kind of interesting how that's happening, huh?
Yeah, it really is. And this is the thing. Technology will always have an impact on warfare, good, bad, or indifferent. And we're right at that point where it's slowing down again. The impact.
One of the things about Shell I want to definitely bookend with is that I'm a big fan of Mark Zuckel's books and huge fan of his too. And actually, I may have him on the show one day. But reading the two battles the book he wrote about the Shell, I think it was Forgotten Battle, and the game plays like the novel of how hard it is and how Canadians were breaking down their anti-aircraft units and putting them up as troops.
Yep.
Well deserved to mark them down.
And that's exactly why we've got that impact in it. And as I said, the developer designer for that particular title is a real stickler for trying, and he understands the game system really well and how to use the game system to emulate the situation. That's one of the benefits of John's engines. And we've got 12 of them, by the way. We've got 12 engines derived from his work. You can adjust the same series. Panzer Campaign is a great example, which is where Shelled comes from. That's a higher operational level. We've just released Philippines 44 earlier in the year. Completely different situation, yet the same engine can handle. And that's one of the beauties of John's engines. There's a lot of customization that as a designer developer we can do to model a particular situation.
And that's perfect segue to the question I was just about to ask. The fungibility of John's game engines to cover so many periods, so many battles, where as the player, I have to know the nuances of that period and the technology. I can't think of any other game engine that can do that. How do you guys essentially look at the fungibility of that engine, is there anything it couldn't do as far as emulating conflict?
Oh, look, I'm certain there's lots it can't do, but there's the ability to add things in. Now, one great example, we touched on Ukraine, and as I said, one of the comments just I was reading about today is that sensors, i.e., cameras, drone operated cameras, ability to spot troop movements is making it almost impossible. Stalemate. Um, we have drones in one of our engines. Now, are they up to the level that would be needed if we want to cover a conflict like what's going on in Ukraine or what's recently happened in Azerbaijan, etc.?
Mhm.
No, but can we add it? Yes, we can. It just comes down to us seeing a need and the title that we want to emulate to have that in. So the answer is the fungibility of the engine is great. And let's be clear, we've got 12 engines. They're not all based off the same engine. John has a couple of real-time engines. So the Air series and the Naval Campaign series are real-time. And then all the rest are you go, I go engines. But there are differences even between similar time periods. So the early American War engine is quite different to the Napoleonics engine, which is different to the Civil War battles engine, which is different to the musket and pike engine. And that's probably one of both the challenges and opportunities we've had at WDS is to say which of these should be enhanced, which of these can be used for other conflicts that we may not have covered before. One of your questions. Um, which engine would we use going forward? And that's what we've been looking at over time and tending to end of life is too strong a word, but put more emphasis behind one or two engines, particularly in that period. And, because we're finished doing the Civil War period and we're finished doing the Napoleonic period, we'll probably do less enhancements in those engines going forward and tend to probably more focus on an engine like musket and pike because it's got a longer period of coverage and a lot of conflicts that we haven't done yet. So it comes down to a mixture of, yes, the engines are very, very fungible, can be changed, but we also need the programmers and we need the programmers with the intimate knowledge of what those engines are doing. And the less engines we're using over time, the more we can dig into them and enhance them.
I met a few years ago, actually running a game for Marine Corps University, a guy, I forgot his name, that worked on a lot of your games, mostly Napoleonics. He lives here in Northern Virginia. Will think of his name as soon as I get off this. I guarantee you. And he's listens, and he'll be mad at me, but I hope he's doing well. Um, and I said, about hey, Forgotten Battles is coming out with Civil War. He goes, there's nothing left to do with that.
Mm.
And looking at the maps, which I know are not easy to do from a programming standpoint, you were able to cover an entire conflict. Um, are you hitting max density with any of the other theaters or
Oh,
campaign
well,
series?
Napoleonics, essentially, we've covered everything you can cover too. If you look at
Yeah.
the coverage we've got there, we're pretty much, other than going to Egypt or India, we're pretty much done for those particular ones. And that's what I'm sort of saying, that there were significant differences between the code in the Civil War battles versus Napoleonic's engine. And that's because they had quite different, was changes in technology over that 60 odd year period, 50, 60 year odd period. So those engines have evolved separately because of people like the developer you were mentioning who made their services available, and then John then built an engine for them. And I think that's the other thing to realize is these games don't happen because of John Tiller or WDS for that matter. It's the developers who've got the subject matter that get us through. They're the guys who are the experts, provide the input and the knowledge. We don't know what happened in Napoleon's Russian campaign in any level of detail, but there are people out there that do and want to see it in the game, and they're the people that contribute for us.
Yeah, I'm going to
But
admit something, and I don't want you to take me to court. Your orders of battle are
yep,
so well done. I've used them for other projects
I'm not
because
surprised.
the, I look for a mistake sometimes and I can't find any. And I was talking to when I was at Carlisle for an Army War game, they were looking at orders of battle and redoing some of them and doing some more research. And I told the guy about this is just as you guys became WDS. I got an email from him like, "Oh my god, like this is they don't really leave anything out." And it's not for lack and it's down to almost the individual person. Um, that must take a long time, which I do want to ask. Let's say right now somebody affiliated with you has an idea for a game, knows what engine they want to use because I'm sure they know the engine. What is that design process like? I know it's not short. Would you be able to take us through that?
Yeah, this is how the vast majority of our organization works. People will approach us and say, "Hey, I'm an expert on, oh, let's pick a conflict. Um, Iran-Iraq War,
Mm,
1980 to 88. Really interested in doing a title on that." And we'll essentially sit down with them and sort of ask what the background is, where's the information coming from, what do they think the focus of the title should be? Is it all of the war? Is it the battle around, the marshes that was in the south, or the drive towards, um, in the north, wherever it might be? Tell us what you want to emulate, and where you see the title in this and where the interest is. And once we go through that process, we tend to work out what engine. Will the engine work without any modification? And then we ask them to go away and do exactly as you said, lay out an order of battle. Who was there? What were they doing? Etc. And from that, we can then build a first scenario, add the artwork and everything. But it's a process where the enthusiast does, or the developer does, a lot of the work right up front to show us that there's actually a game there. Our decision is usually around which engine to use, is there any coding required, what artwork's needed to get it over the line, and then pull it all together from a scenario perspective and a playtesting perspective. But that process can be quick and it can be long. Um, you touched on a REL 43. The guy who's doing that is a Spanish guy, fantastic guy. He published Rumyantsev 43 with us 12 months ago, last November, and here we
mhm.
are 11 months later releasing a REL 43. And I can tell you he's got more games in that series underway right now. And we'll talk about the arc of that series in a minute. But he's very quick. He'd done a lot of the order of battle work. He'd done a lot of the scenario work before he even came and talked to us. He was a modder and he was working with other titles. So it just comes down to how much time people have got to allocate to it. But it all starts with essentially determining the scope of what you want to simulate and what that then is required for the order of battle and how much help they need from us on it.
Has anybody ever approached you with a title? I know you alluded to it with Shelt 44. You're like, there's just nothing there. And it surprised you with how good the game is and then also sold very well.
Yep. Uh, Lots of games surprise us how well they sell. You'd be surprised how many niche games do well. You can put out a game like Wolfpack, or I'm trying to think about something recent. Even Great Northern War. Great Northern War is a great example. You know, very few people outside of Scandinavia know about the Great Northern War, um, which, for those of you wondering, is Sweden and Russia and all around the Baltic. I wasn't expecting that to do well. It did really well. And part of that was some of the engine enhancers. Part of it was a topic that was unusual. Part of it was historic. The vast majority of people that buy our games are obviously interested in history, and a lot of people didn't know about it. So, what a great way to learn about it. And I think some of it comes back to what you say. We spend the time on the research to get to understand what happened, and that's why I tend to favour putting as much detail into the game as possible, because not only is it a learning exercise, but you understand why that was a constraint or an opportunity for a site. When you can see it and physically say, oh my God, look at all my Panthers, but they keep breaking down. They were great until they didn't go anymore. You understand the challenges these guys had when they turned up. So it's really important to get that right for the player, because then they get a much better appreciation for it.
I think the player experience from all your games, and I'm trying to see which series I don't have, and I think I have a bunch of titles in all of them. I have my favorites and some more than others just because of my historical interest. But I think the experience the gamer gets, I think it's worth that hard work because looking at how the game runs and the decisions you can make, because you have a lot of player agency as a player. And I've only played the game solo. I think that more gamers should be playing these games. Um, I mean, the graphics have gone through some amazing upgrades. Some of the artwork in that Civil War series is awesome. Um, but it's when you look at a computer-based war game that's not with helmet fire and is not with, come on now. I've never had a bad playing experience, and if I did, I blame my own stupid decision making. And I think that translates well to some of us out here that are just huge fans. The games play well. There's never a time where I go, that's not right. Um, One of the things, you talk about some of the engines you have. Your air power series, I used it to teach people how to do an ATO and then what an ATO looks like while running. Air
Mhm.
tasking order for those that don't know. And John Tiller did do a game for Air University, but here is a civilian version of the game, and it's so accurate. Um, Sometimes I don't like the result when my B-52s get shot down over Hanoi, but I got to live with that. And then looking back as a learning tool, what can I change to do? Do I need more wild weasels? Do I need more? I, it's it's something. Look, not every game genre or not every period that you guys cover may be something that a gamer likes, but if you like Civil War, I always recommend those. And even some of the ones that just have like Modern Air Power as what, two titles?
No,
Um,
more than that now. More than
Three,
that now. I think it's
because you got
oh, we've
Modern,
got the demo. We've got the demo as well,
yeah,
which is
and,
the one that carries with the air task and orders range.
yeah, it's pretty good. And that's the other cool thing too, the demos. Um, One of the favorite demos I like to play is you guys put a Monte Casino for Panzer battles in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to drop a hint, but it would be awesome to see a Panzer battles or Panzer campaigns in there because it was such an interesting campaign. And I'll tell you what really got me desiring that was how well you guys did Schelt, which was a similar type fight. One is straight mountains in sunny and hot Italy. The other one is in mud slogging. I'm thinking, it's with a lot of other game companies that I play their games. I talk to designers. I get a lot of we can't do that. We've been talking now for a while, and one of your approach, we know how to take one of our engines and kind of tinker it to give a gamer that experience. I've never really had too many conversations like that with folks in your industry. I get a lot of we can't do that. Is that because of the great amount of work you guys put in? What do you kind of
Oh, I
owe that to?
I think let's be clear too. We've got over
Yeah,
100 titles now.
yeah, you
That's a
do.
lot. That's both a lot of games, but a lot of experience at and tweaking's maybe too casual a word. The way John set a lot of these games up or these series, there's a parameter data file which allows us as a developer designer to tweak, how fast do units move, how much does it cost to cross a river, a whole range of things, what's it like moving in mud. Guess what, that was important in Shell.
Mm,
And so you can tweak the game experience so that, what, in one title moving through mud is horrific, and another title it's mud, it's hardly an issue at all. um, just those little tweaks can make a whole different feel to a game. The chance for air interdiction or air interception or artillery effectiveness or whatever. And that's one of the beauties of the series is John's left it fairly open from a developer perspective on what we can change to get the feel that we want in a particular title. That's why, we can do a Pacific title and a Russian title and a desert title in Pacific campaigns and yet get quite a unique feel. Yet it's all the same code. We're not having to write special code for particular theaters or whatever 9 times out of 10. And some of the enhancement we've done, for example, the First World War campaigns, to reflect, for example, the fighting in East Prussia and in Serbia, where there were irregular troops and other things, we can carry that across into other series, and use it for more fidelity, as I touched on before with Shell. So that's one of the beauties of it. We're tending to find that feature sets, once added, we can then carry it across to other engines and pull it in place. We had an option in a series called Strategic War called surrender hexes, which is when does a country surrender? When does
mm.
it give up? We built that into Panzer campaigns for the France 40 title. Why? Because the Dutch gave up after 5 days. When the Germans invaded in May 40. Um, but to have a player have that concern that all the Dutch were going to go away, you couldn't do it in a traditional board game without lots of rules or a traditional computer game in our series. So all we did was board across the surrender hexes. The player doesn't know which ones they are necessarily, but they're some of the main locations. And once lost, the Dutch would drop out the game. So what we've found is 9 times out of 10, with the breadth of series that we've got, the breadth of games that we've usually got a solution to the problem has been done in the past, or we can tweak something that was already there and apply it. And that's been one of the great things about John's systems.
I would hate to see, but love to see your wargaming architecture. Um, how everything all connects. I am sure that cannot be easy because there's a lot of it out there, and how you will tweak and mod a system to kind of get that flavor right. it, uh, it definitely has to be a lot of work. Looking
It's a
at,
lot of
yeah, sorry.
testing. There's a lot of testing involved, and our programmers had to be adept to it because the challenge is John never wrote the code for others to work on. It was all written for him. I can tell you right now, the commenting in the code is not sufficient. So it's all hats off to our programmers for what's been achieved. To be honest with you.
Yeah. Oh, totally without a doubt. Um, looking back at the catalog, and we got Orel that just came out.
Mm.
Kind of bookends the Kursk because you've already done Kursk in the South, I believe. Um, Looking at that title, um, so I'll tell you how it went my first few plays. I had to run a lot of Russians coming at me, um, where I expected to have more of a Kursk type feel. Uh, that is a very interesting game, and the map work for that. So I'm thinking in that whole Central Front in 1943, there's a WDS map for it somewhere.
There is.
Wow.
We have, and we've touched on this publicly, so I can talk about it now. So Arel is the second game in what we're calling Summer 43 series. It actually has a title. It's called Donetsk Front 43. And it's a play on a title we released, or John released many years ago in the Modern Campaigns series called Danube Front 85, which joined together into a next war, NATO versus Warsaw Pact series game. And you join 3 games together to get a whole of front. Well, guess what Donetsk Front is going to do? It's going to join together a number of titles, ultimately, just for the campaign games. So if you want to do the whole of the Southern Russian Front in July and August and September 1943, this title will do that for you. But Arel and Rumyantsev, and for that matter, Kursk 43, and I will say right now 2 as yet unannounced titles, will give you all 40 or 50 scenarios of detail, from small to large. But the Donetsk Front will pull all those titles together into a number of huge, big campaign games for multiplayer. That'll be the idea of it. Will be a design that you can play the whole front. You can decide where armies go, reinforcements go, etc., based upon the starting positions at particular times of that particular summer.
One of
So
the
Arel
things
is.
sorry.
No, I was going to say, so Arel's just one part of that.
Actually, my question was so geeky. I now thinking maybe I shouldn't ask it. One of the things I like about your engine is the mathematics behind it. When I am looking at clicking and looking for and getting a combat outcome, I I, I know that you guys are looking at bands distribution. How many die rolls are going on in the engine to give me that true distribution to make it kind of, yep, this seems about right? Is it just the one? I don't think it's doing a whole Monte Carlo, but
Oh,
what is going on there?
lots, and I'm not the numbers geek. The programmers are. Um, there is, and you'll see it in the optional rules, particularly for Panzer campaigns. There
Yeah.
is the chance to do an averaging where it does more than one roll.
Hmm.
My belief is it's one roll per fight, though it comes
Hmm.
down to the number of units. If you're attacking with 3 hexes, there'll be 3 rolls, or with 3 units. So it's a roll per unit. But there's also, as I said, optional rules that will average, do a number of rolls, so that you end up with a smaller variation. But yeah, John was a mathematician, and he
Yeah.
was a maths major, big maths major, and that shows all the way through. We have tweaked little bits of that, um, and because in some areas we felt John went too simple. And I'll give you a classic example: squad battles. So
Hmm.
squad battles, range attenuation. The squad battles of all titles. There's long ranges, um, and they came up with a concept of effective range, not the actual range of the weapon, but at what point is it effective to? Will it impact or kill something at a certain range? Otherwise, there's no point. But the range attenuation was very simple. It was doubled at 1 hex and halved from 50% of the effective range out, and everywhere in between was 100 or 50. So it was very, very, very basic, and we felt it just wasn't right. So we've ended up with configurable for the designer, where you can set from 200%, which is close range, down to when does it get to 100%, so how many hexes away, how much distance, and then at what point does it go down to 0, and what level of drop off do you want? Do you want
Mm.
it to be linear? Do you want it to be logarithmic? What do you want it to be? So We've added some enhancements there where we felt it was lacking. But as far as the physical engine for the ranges, and again, it's very configurable. The developer can change those values, the high-low values and everything else that the rolls are in between. We haven't mucked around with the maths too much behind, to be honest with you. We've found some happy mediums in terms of the values that we use. And in a series like Panzer Campaigns and Panzer Battles, we've tried to be standard as much as we can across the various games so that people don't get surprised. Why all of a sudden is this unit killing so many more units in another game? So we've tried not to muck around with those kinds of maths. But yeah, it's fascinating. But you
It
need to
is.
talk to a programmer before you talk to me on the physical maths and the number of rolls and everything else.
That was a great answer. You talk about the mathematics. I sometimes go, and just because of day job, with the mathematics, but a board game designer, and I'll dime him out, Maurice, because I invited him to come today. But he's also a college professor, and he was talking about different stochastic probabilistic models that he can use in a board game, and I'm like, players have to play the game, and nobody wants to look up charts, tables, this and that. No board game designer likes using proprietary dice, which can figure it out too. But I said, go play some of the the WDS games, and
Yeah.
all I got was a message from him yesterday. I got a lot of questions. This is pretty good. So hopefully I didn't steer him wrong, and I think that's what's kind of neat. You know, especially working a little bit in the game design space. How do I break this game? And it's unbreakable, and that's one of the things that I think that gives the player such a great experience. I don't want to tell you the amount of titles I have. You said 128 games. I'm going to say I have half of them.
Yep.
It's basically I I pick the games I like. You talk about your 7 Year War game. I know nothing about that at all, but I wanted to see how that game played, what the differences were between the Napoleonic game, between the early Americas game, and I felt it was interesting. It does give a unique experience, but the interface is so close, and what you're looking at graphically, if you played one, it can easily transfer into the other. But even within titles, um, the Mexican American game plays so much differently than War of 1812, and it plays that much differently than 1776. I don't know what
And
engines are in each, but
the,
very impressive.
so those last three you mentioned are all the same engine. So
Are they?
yeah, that's all the early American War series.
But they play a
And
little
that
differently.
but that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. This is the
yeah,
parameter data files that we can adjust some critical values, and it comes down to the order of battle, and how the values are assigned. It's one of the beauties, as I said, of John's stuff,
mhm,
and having the ability to get a number of guys to sit down and talk through. Okay, so what changed between 1812 and 1776? Well, this changed, so we should reflect that in the order of battle and in the way the units are structured or set up. The same discussion went through with 7 Year War. That was a precursor to Napoleonics, and a whole lot of differences came through in the engines there. But that's both a positive and, as I said, a bane for us because um, our big focus, and would you believe we're coming up to our 2-year anniversary this month,
yeah,
um, being November 2023. We launched in November 2021, and the vast majority of my personal time, and one of the reasons you don't have Panzer Battles Moscow, has been getting both the graphical and game UIs and infrastructure consistent. We have spent so much time modernizing these titles, and modernizing I'm using very loosely when I say modernizing, but getting things like the user interface sorted and consistent so that people can jump from series to series, getting the map work and the graphics at least to some semblance of modernity has been really important, because really it was such an eyesore. There was so much good work in, as you said, all the battle of scenarios, yet the stuff looked like something from God knows how long back, the 80s.
Yeah.
And that's where we've put a lot of time into enhancing the existing titles, just getting them consistent. And trust me, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of not fun work at all.
If you had to ask me as a fan, what would I rather have, you updating the titles or getting new ones out? I really would know how to answer that question,
Yeah,
because when I think 403, I think, was the latest in one of the series, or they're all, because I guess when WDS you started at 4.0,
yeah.
looks like. I'll play the game just to see what's different, and I'll fall in love with it again. And it's one of the few games, I hate to tell this story in public, but going back to Market Garden, playing the entire big campaign. I started playing it. I had a day off. Started playing it in the morning, and all of a sudden I look at it, it's nighttime, and I didn't even
Mm,
realize it.
mm.
And I can't think of any other game that can do that, because there's no human interaction. I'm playing against the AI. Um, if you play against an opponent, that guy may have to go to the bathroom. You know,
Yeah.
it's it just plays so well. So let's talk about the fun part now. You seem to like a lot of the Russian front stuff based on some of the games that you mentioned. Um, Really looking at gaming in general, not just PC, what are some conflicts that just aren't gamed enough but are fertile to be gamed? And if you have a spoiler or two, we'd love to hear it. But really, it's looking at, millennia of conflict. What
Oh,
needs to be
it
gamed
is.
more?
Oh, gosh, where do we start?
Uh,
Look, there is so much stuff we could do and can do. So one area that we're now starting to dig a bit deeper into, and spoiler alert,
yeah.
is we're starting to look at the Victorian era. We're calling it the 1850 to 1910 period, and seeing what can we do there. Um,
Okay.
it, it's rarely covered. You've got all the colonial walls of various sizes and shapes, and this has all come a little bit off the back of our little Bighorn demo that we put out, which is part of the early American War series.
Yeah, it's a fun
Lot
little.
that Yeah, it's a fun little game, that one. A lot of people like the scale, um, and the impact they had. And once we started to talk about everything post Civil War, um, all the colonial wars, whether it was in India, whether it was in Africa, whether it was in Asia. You talk about the Franco-Prussian War. You talk about the Japanese-Russo War of 1905. There's a truckload of stuff there that has been very fringe and definitely not mainline. So that's certainly an area that we're looking at. If you think of the engines that we've got, currently we go from the Renaissance up to pretty much modern, pretty much close to today. Um, but there's big gaps in between. We haven't, as I said, covered this Victorian era. We haven't covered pre-Renaissance. So, there's a whole ancient series there that could potentially be covered and looked at. And then there's the uncool areas like Shelled that you touched on.
Mm.
No one's really done many games on that because it was hard to do. Um,
I,
World War II continues to be fertile. There's so much stuff we can do in there. Um, it's crazy.
I was going to joke and say, no, wrong answer. I want to see Zulu Wars, but we did not coordinate on that whatsoever.
No,
No.
well, I'll just say we have a subject matter expert on Zulu Wars right now.
I'm not going to read into that.
Yeah, I'll just say we do. He knows Zulu Wars and the Boer War very well. So you never know what may come from that. But
I've yet to play a game in my entire life, and there was just some controversy about Canvas Temple Publishing. Joe Miranda did a strategic level Boer War campaign, and I've never seen such a horrible. Well, let's be honest, all gamers are experts, or at least they think they are. That just lambasted the game, and I'm like, you're doing the Boer War. You don't do divisions and corps, man. That's just how it is.
yeah,
And a lot of times, is you want to look at that right engine that can do it. um, Looking at how partisans played in Shelt and in other games, I'm looking at Boer War. I mean, really, there's no topic where I would say, I bet you can't do this, because I'm not stupid. I'm not, looking at the fungibility of all your titles and engines. I wouldn't dare you was saying, I bet you can't do
no,
this.
yeah. Again, it comes down to just having the people who've got the knowledge to get involved. Um, and then, yeah, 9 times out of 10, we've got an agent that can usually cover it. And
What would
we're
what
trying
would
to
be a
continue to enhance it.
what would be a passion project for you to make into a game?
Oh, for me, gosh, there's a couple. Um, the strategic war engine, we're enhancing that pretty significantly at the moment. And the crazy thing with the strategic war engine, which we've got a couple of titles out on, is that it was designed to handle the scale of, the high level of Panzer campaigns, but
Mm,
was only ever really a battle generator. It wasn't something you could do a whole front on or whatever well. So I've dreamt for quite a while to do a core level Eastern Front. You touched on it. I love the Eastern Front. I've been involved with that for many years. That's one. But on the other side, I love my Panzer battles too. And if you saw the list that I have for Panzer battles at the moment, it's ridiculous. And the maps I've got done, I've just got to do the work for. Um, there's a heap there. But one that I think that would work very well at a Panzer battle scale that I love to do is Market Garden. I think Market Garden would be brilliant at that Panzer battles, battalion level. Um, just the range of units the Germans had that they had to throw in there, and
mm,
the fact, and the beauty of Market Garden is we've actually got the vast majority of the orders of battle. Why?
yeah.
Because all the guys in Normandy went to Market Garden. You know, we've nearly, there's very little change other than the quality and the leaders that were there. We got the vast majority of the guys already set up in orders of battle already in Normandy. So I'd
I'm
love to do that.
it's so widely read,
Hmm.
and you and I are around the same age. What movie really kind of got us so interested in that?
Oh,
Um,
we know. A
oh
bridge
yeah,
too far. A
I
bridge
quote
too far.
I quote that movie all the time. I actually helped a student that was in a war college wrote an amazing paper on the logistics of the campaign, the air bridge, the ground, down to so much detail. And then he compared it to other campaigns in history, which is when he freaking classified it. I go, you need to pull that stuff out and put that out as a separate
Yeah.
thing, because it is so interesting. And, looking at the scale of those two series that you just mentioned, Market Garden, I mean, it's very well covered in titles, because I think some of Market Garden is in the Schelt, I believe.
Yes.
And
So we covered it again. We did a very up to date full campaign in Shell because that was a big hunk of that. It's one of the reasons that Shell happened the way it happened was because of
yeah,
the failure ultimately at Market Card. Um, and that's an interesting point. We have revisited older titles. In this case, we picked up the campaign from Market Card and redid it for Shell. And we've done the same thing in Arel and Rumyantsek, where we've covered the north and southern flank of the Kursk attack, because so much more information's come out in the meantime.
Yeah.
People wouldn't realize this, but we touched on my Russian front interest about when I did the Kursk game and also the Moscow game before that, Panzer Campaigns Moscow. We had, and the guy I did the Order of Battle work with, who's brilliant, had all contacts in Moscow who would go into the Soviet archives, which had just been opened up, and photograph them for us. And
Nice.
then we had stuff no one else had in the West at that time to work on. That's how serious we were about it. But yeah, it's great stuff. We love to revisit titles too, where we think it's appropriate, and that's what's great the longevity for the games overall. Is that we've been happy to keep them up to date and or re-examine them as we go forward.
All right. So I'm going to ask, what's a better book on Market Garden? Martin Biddlebrook's book or Anthony Beaver's, where he covers a wider scope?
No, Middlebrook definitely.
Middle.
Middlebrook by far. It. I'm fortunate. Every 2 years, I go on a battlefield tour to go and actually see the ground. I want to say it was 2015. I did Market Garden, which is fascinating. Um, I also want to say when I released the Panther Battles Kursk, I changed it because I went to Kursk in 2013 on the what would have been 70th anniversary. Yeah, 70th
Yeah.
anniversary of the battle, um, which is fascinating. I'll never get back there again, but fascinating to walk the ground. And we actually changed some of the maps based upon the photographs we took because a lot of the battlefields unchanged. It's
Yeah.
fascinating to go and see it and understand what happened.
I want you to know I walked from one of the drop zones in the 82nd all the way to Arnhem.
Wow.
Yeah. And after this is over, I'll tell you how I got to that drop zone. But they do that every few years where the guys from Vincenza and British 16th Division or Brigade now, because it's Air Assault and Paratrooper, will drop in and do the march up. And because it's, that last mile that they just really didn't make, and so much fun, but walking on that and looking at, good God, I would not want to be a tank here.
No,
It just gives you the appreciation of that was a rough battlefield, especially for modern mechanized armies. And walking it's a good amount of miles. And Robert Redford, we have to go. Said it's just a few miles up the road. Not with a modern army, my friend.
no.
It is so amazing
It,
to walk that, and the Dutch come out, and we end up in the cemetery there.
yeah, that's exactly why I'm again very fortunate to go and do these battlefield tours. Just after we did North Africa, literally a year after I went to Crete. And that was an eye opener. I
Yeah,
wouldn't want to parachute into Crete. I promise you that right now, for a
no,
million and one reasons.
yeah,
But yeah, it's great. It's great to see because it gives you a new appreciation. And if you can then emulate that in the titles you're putting out, it just hopefully gives it a little bit more authenticity as well.
yeah. Which I'm going to sign up right now. You ever need a play tester? Give me a call.
We could be
I got
calling
free.
you imminently.
I have a lot of free time. We'll talk offline. But
Yeah.
it's the titles. For folks out there, look, we got bored and miniature gamers that listen to us. We do a lot of historical podcasts on books. But if you haven't checked these games out, I really kind of try one. Y- You guys run sales twice a year. One's coming up, I believe, in December if you're going to do it as scheduled, or not this year.
Well, we never commit to anything, but times are tough. We need to make certain pricings right for people, so you can almost
Yeah,
assume
well,
that will happen. But importantly, that's why we have the demos. We're a big try before you buy.
yeah,
That's the
get those
whole
demos.
reason the demos are there. Yeah, the demos are there. But you've also hit another nail on the head here. We believe our core constituency of players hopefully come from a board game background too, because they then appreciate both the content that we've got, the usability of the way the game plays, but also even the pricing. Um, because we've been pretty consistent on our pricing for years, yet the industry's got a tendency, at least if you get onto Steam or one of the other
Yeah.
platforms, to push pricing down, 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 and we struggle with that. Yet if you compare us to the average board game and the amount of content we give, we're really good value, and that's what we think. Reaching out to more board gamers, miniature gamers, because our Napoleonics and other games have all got a miniature-like view. We're much more appropriate for that niche, to be honest with you.
And I've always said board, miniature, and PC gamers are kind of cousins in the same family. They only see each other a few times a year and they don't always get along. Um, but talking to a lot of them, I figured there would be so much more crossover because, especially when, no dice, no we run a ton of tournaments and we talk about other games to get the kind of, same little environment that we're playing in this scenario, like, North Africa. These are good games. It's it's trying to get them to cross over. And the selling point, I think, with your titles are it's a board game that you don't have to set up. That's the beauty thing. The other one is it's not Vassal, which sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but it's better than anything else that's out there. I really wish, and maybe I will make that my 2024 push is to make sure that we start cross pollinating you guys. Miniatures. I don't know if you play it. I do. Um, they're a bit of a different breed. They're part modelers. Um, Board gamers have to love the history, in my opinion, and it's also different. I say to some of the war gamers I mentioned, board games you play against somebody, miniature gamers you kind of have to play with them.
Yeah.
Now I'm throwing in PC game you can play by yourself.
Mm.
It scratches different itches, but I think if you love the history and you want to get that feel, you do 80 something percent of board gamers play solo. Why aren't you buying titles like this that do the same thing just as well?
Yeah.
That I
And,
don't
and
get.
and we've found in our surveys too, the AI, being able to play against an AI is the critical item. It really is. The vast majority of people do. It's actually why we're spending the time to try and improve the AI as best we can. There's
Yeah,
actually been quite a bit of work going on that right now.
AI is pretty good though. Not something I
You might
complain about.
you might be upset with the next version.
Uh-oh. Oh, is the AI getting a little harder?
It'll just have a few more inputs to consider. Let's just put it that way.
All right. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. But let me look at Craig because I have a feeling you and I could probably talk for another hour and a half. But one thing I do want to preach out there is, if Central Front 43 Russia is not your thing, try some of the other games. One of the things that I thought you guys did, and I think it was a calculated risk, was the Japanese 1946 and 45 um, games that
Yep.
were operations that never happened and were going to be extremely bloody. They're hard, but they're a lot of fun. Playing either side. And then the Philippines 44 that you guys did not too long ago. Um, it's great to see that that part of the war is getting some treatment. I got to tell you, I'm still waiting for Kohima Imphal, and we talked before. I think about Kokoda. I I think also I think that will appeal to a lot of gamers.
Yeah.
Those titles.
There is no shortage of titles, trust me, and
Uh,
there's no shortage of what we can do with the engine. One thing I do want to mention, though, you mentioned Japan 45, Japan 46, which is Coronet and Olympic,
Hmm.
respectively. And we have the Sea Lion title, and we
Sea
have
Lion.
the one, and we also have Full Tremor, which is the one I did in Moscow 42. Every one of these hypotheticals, though, are based upon the actual planning. So
Yep.
the forces that were intended to be there have been planned to be there and were going to be used. We've essentially used all the official plans. So Olympic was going ahead. They were
Hmm.
there. That was going to kick off in November of 45. So it was very easy to get all the forces in place. And I guess that's always our focus. It's nice to have the hypotheticals, but do them as correctly as you can because players will come and play them. And they have been successful titles, by the way. Very
Your
successful titles.
your 45 made me think of some of the things I doubted about Richard Frank's book Downfall,
Hmm.
about a proposed invasion of Japan, of how, look, even the US was running out of people. And
Yep.
it, in a way, some of the things I disagreed, I had that through that game, the experiential learning, to go back, reread those parts of the book and say, I shouldn't have doubted Dr. Frank. And that's if a game can give you that, it's doing something right.
Yeah.
Um,
It, and
it,
again, that fell out by just seeing the terrain up right and the units right. With their strengths and weaknesses, and it
yeah,
sort of fell out in the play. And that's what we hope happens by trying to understand what was constraints, what were the advantages, what the disadvantages of both sides, and then try and get that get that to work. And it seemed to work.
and I'll tell you what I like a lot about it is, especially playing the Americans and knowing just a little bit about air power, is you got to use that stuff right.
Mm,
And you have to know where you're going to attack. You can't attack everywhere. Concentrate, and then at some point, no, you can't bomb there anymore, Mitch. Which I like because very realistic, and
yeah.
it's just such a great game system. Yeah, I forgot about Sea Lion 40. I it's one of the few I don't own.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's one of my favorites.
All
Just
right,
just just to tease you, Mitch. It's one of my favorites. That's a
all right,
fantastic little scenario.
all right. Well,
Nothing like the quaint English villages names as you're fighting for, you know, fish on pond or wherever it might be.
yeah, it's all right. So now I know what I'm buying next.
Yeah.
Because the last time you guys had a sale, I'll tell you what my biggest problem was. I had almost all the titles based on my likes of history, and some
Mm.
of the series I like more than others. I was squad battles, the tactical end. You guys do it well. It's just something I wasn't into. I still own 8 of them. My favorite is the First World War. Yeah, and everybody that's listening that listens normally, here he goes again. His love of the Great War. Um, that game is that just feels right.
Yeah.
And I still remember when that came out. I'm like, come on, guys. It just plays so well, and it covers the whole war very well. And France 14 is still one of my favorites as well. It You
Well,
really feel the pressure at Mons. You
yeah.
definitely do.
Look, the developer for that, or both those games, all the First World War campaign series, which is 3 titles, and also the Squad Battles First World War title, is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. The guy who's doing the work on that. Yeah, we need to get the whip out on him. No, we don't. He's working very hard on what comes next. But
Well,
yeah,
if he's in the US, I can like stop by and say, let
yeah.
me do a
I
guy a
won't tell you.
favor.
I won't tell you where he is just for that reason.
All right. Okay. I mean, I have no problems because I could beg pretty well, just like anybody
Yeah,
else. But yeah, I'm excited for some of the upcoming titles that you've kind of alluded to, knowing that it may come out in a year and a half. the thing is, I still haven't played every scenario in some of your other games. Like some of the games have over 100 different scenarios,
Yeah.
and
It-
you're not going to get tired of playing that. Oh, by the way, you have two sides, so you can play either side. And it's like, how many games series do that? And the other one too is the pedigree of these games going back to the old Talonsoft games. Who knew that we could play games on computers that wasn't B-1 nuclear bomber? You remember that from way back when?
yes, I do. That
I
was an
know,
old.
I know.
Oh God.
They're redoing it.
Oh, I think that
Yeah,
was one of the first from SSI with Computer Bismarck too. I remember that.
yeah.
Anyway,
I heard a horrible rumor that I'm gonna go and read and see if I read that right. But like some of those games are just, it's just Talonsoft to HPS to JTS to WDS, they've gotten better over time.
mm,
And I'm speaking for all of us. We appreciate all the work that you and that team has put in. Um, I am sure that you guys get the hate mail just like we do here, but I, you know, it's those old crotchety war gamers.
yeah, we're fortunate. We don't get too much hate mail. Um, it's more about when are you going to release something new or release my pet love, etc. When are you going to upgrade it to a particular standard? But it's all very positive. We get great support from the community. We get great support from people like yourself.
Yeah,
And for us, we're going to do more outreach. We think just so that people know what we're doing. And honestly, board gamers, we need to talk more to board gamers because we think we're a lovely fit for what they love to do.
and when we get off, if you have another 15 minutes, I'll throw you some ideas. But I'm gonna have you back as the next title comes out, or if you just really, I'm sure this is going to generate a lot of questions. Love to have you back on this because there were a million things about game design that I
Yeah,
didn't ask. The last podcast I did with a guy at work. I said, hey, because he plays your games, and yeah, I'm busy tonight, and I'm like, what are you going to ask him? And I got to be honest with you, I may have, out of the half hour discussion, I may have asked you two of those questions.
excellent.
So
Well, I'll come back. I'll be
yeah,
happy to come back, and I'm
uh,
happy to do just if your listeners throw some questions in and want to do a Q and A,
oh, they
happy to do
will.
a Q and A.
We'll make that happen. We'll make it
Yep.
happen. And yeah, of course, as we usually do, we're going to turn it back to Sean. And people say, "What do you guys talk about afterwards?" Well, we talk about you personally. But David, thank you so much for this. Um, like I said, I have a million more questions. So I definitely want to have you on. And if you want to pull somebody else from the team, you know, maybe that World War I guy. Um,
Maybe.
yeah, it's. I'll talk to anybody from from your design team because interesting fact. I was working with Rich to try to get John Tiller, and they kept pushing it back, and I didn't know he was sick. I think nobody did, and
Mm.
I kind of missed out on that. But when I said to Rich, look, I can write an article. I've written plenty of articles on your stuff. But I think people kind of need to hear your excitement, my excitement, and go buy some WDS games. Let me plug. If you don't know the website, it's wargameds.com. And if you want, send me an email or hit me up on Facebook, and I'll tell you my favorite titles that I probably haven't mentioned. But hopefully, sales of Shelt 44 will go up. But at least go get the demos. Um, the demos cover a lot of the waterfront of WDS games, and check them out. And if you hate it, it's a demo. I'll return your money to you. I'll guarantee those three games.
You're a good man, Mitch. What would they do without you?
Probably live long and happy lives. But David, Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to Sean in the studio and come hit us with your questions.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.